Hi, welcome to In the Garden. I'm Andrew Grossman, and if you're wondering why I'm wearing a bathing suit, it's because today we're going to be talking about my pond and I'm going to show you how to plant a lotus. But first I have a few other things I want to show you in another garden, so come along with me and we'll start on the other side of the house. People have been asking me about this beautiful vine. It's a mandevilla and the variety is Alice DuPont. This is a tropical vine, which means it isn't hardy. It won't winter over, but it's extremely fast growing. So if you have a place that's sunny, that needs a quick growing vine for the summer, this is a terrific choice. It will bloom right up until frost, and as you can see, it's already almost reached the top of this arbor. The flowers, which are held on relatively long stems, are also really nice to cut and use in arrangements. In a future episode, I'll be doing some flower arrangements and I'll show you how to use them. But still, I have a couple other things I want to show you, so come this way. Now, this amazing lily is called Black Beauty. And what's unusual about this lily is that it's an Orion pet lily. Now, Orion pet is a combination of two terms, oriental and trumpet. And this lily is a hybrid between those two types of lilies. The thing that makes it particularly unusual is that whereas most lilies just have a single row of flowers like this at the top, this lily actually produces side stems, so that right here you can see there's one flower, another bud, and one more bud. These extra buds and side stems give this lily a very long blooming period, so you can enjoy it in your garden for quite a long time. It's also, as you can see, extremely robust. Now, when you buy these as bulbs, which you can order from a lot of catalogs, the first year the stem will not be nearly this big. This plant is probably 6 years old, and every year it gets taller, produces more flowers, and also produces additional stems. So from what I originally planted as 3 bulbs, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different stems for quite a show. And while we're standing here, I want to show you another great plant. This is a new kind of echinacea. Most people know echinaceas as a summer blooming pink or white flower, but recently a lot of new varieties have come on the market. And this one is called hot papaya and has strikingly reddish orange flowers that have a ring of petals at the bottom and this mass of petals at the top. This plant will bloom for quite a long period through the summer, and each flower lasts for weeks. This plant is 2 years old and will keep increasing in size. So if you're looking for a summer blooming plant with bright flowers and a long bloom period, the echinaceas are a great choice. Now come along and I want to show you something in the blue and white garden. Now we're in my blue and white garden, so you're probably wondering, what are these pink flowers doing? A lot of people ask me why their phlox changes color. This is garden phlox, which is a very common summer plant. And often people buy one color and end up with another one. Well, the fact of the matter is that the phlox isn't changing color, it's self-seeding. And when the seeds sprout, they often are a different color from their parent plant. Also, the seedlings are often stronger and more vigorous than their parent plant. And so eventually what happens is they crowd out the parent and you're left with a completely different color. which makes most people think that their plant has changed color, but in fact, it's just been crowded out by a more vigorous seedling. Now, I've left these here because I actually like to cut them and bring them into the house, and so I will cut these and use them in an arrangement and not feel bad about it because they're not supposed to be here in the first place. Now, I have one more thing to show you. Periodically during the summer, I plant what I call filler plants in my garden. These are usually annuals, and they fill a hole left by a plant that's already finished blooming. Now in this case, this was a stand of Asiatic lilies that have finished blooming, and so there's some space between them. Now obviously I'll need to be careful when I plant to make sure that I don't disturb the bulbs. Now I have 2 pots here, and I could try to just squeeze them in the garden like this, but that really wouldn't make that much of a show. So I'm going to show you a neat trick. A lot of times when you go to a nursery and see a pot of flowers like this is a variety of salvia, an annual salvia with nice blue flowers that will go for the entire summer. You don't realize that it's actually 4 plants. There's 4 different plants in this pot, and they're planted much too close together to really grow well. So what I do is I take the plant out of the pot like this, and then I take a knife and I see where the plants are. So in this case, first I just cut right down the center like this. And then there's 2 more, and I cut those right in half, like that. Now for the price of 1 pot, I've gotten 4 plants that in a very short period of time will be even larger than this one. So again, I can do that with this as well. So here I'm just going to take my knife again, and I'm going to cut down the center. A little root pruning does not hurt these plants. In fact, they benefit from it. So you don't have to worry about that. You do want to make sure, though, that you make relatively even cuts. The other thing that's great about this is now I have a plant with a much smaller root system, so it'll be easy for me to dig a hole for it without disturbing other plants. So I just dig a nice little hole, make sure it's deep enough. Gotta get a little bit deeper. And then pop that right in there. And then I'm gonna come into here in between these 2. And I'm just gonna dig a little narrow hole, just enough that I can fit this right in there like that. And then I'm going to go over into here. And this way, I don't have to dig a very big hole, so I'm not disturbing the lilies, which are going dormant. I'm just digging a hole big enough to get these in here. Now I have very good soil, so I don't have to worry about making my holes very big, just big enough to stick the plant in there. I'll do a little bit of weeding while I'm down here. Stick this in here. Another one in there. Put one over here. See, it really only takes a couple minutes. Let's see, let's put another one right over here. We'll take that out. That was not doing well. Just pull that right out. Stick that right in there. Be sure to water. You always want to water after you plant, particularly this time of year. And there you go, 8 plants for the price of 2. Now before we leave here, I just want you to take a look at these amazing water lilies. Water lilies are very sensitive to sunlight, and most water lilies, particularly the hardy ones, close when the light goes off of them. So you'll notice when we go back up to the other pond that the lilies that were blooming this morning have already started to close, but this is what they look like. So it's really a very showy garden subject. Before we plant the lotus, I just want to talk about a couple of other really interesting plants that are growing around this pond. Look at the leaf on this. It's absolutely spectacular. This is a Colocasia mojito. Colocaceas are in the taro family, and actually in some areas of the world the corm or rhizome is a food source. But here in the Northeast we pretty much grow this plant as an ornamental garden plant. It comes in a number of different varieties. There's one like this one over here in which the entire leaf is this almost black color. Now this for some reason appeared on this plant, so I'll be interested to see what happens with that. In the fall, I dig these up and bring them inside where they actually make a nice house plant. Then in the summer, I bring them out again. Now last year, I started with just 2 of these. They got quite large by the end of the summer, and I brought them inside, and in the spring I divided them up and got 12 plants out of them. So even though colocaceas are rather expensive to buy as a single plant or as a single corm, if you winter them over, you can really get a lot of plants for your money. Now let's take a look at something else. Most people think of azaleas as spring blooming shrubs, but this azalea is an Azalea viscosum or swamp azalea. Swamp azaleas bloom in June and July, and they're also fragrant. This one is called lemon drop, and the flowers open sort of a cream, and then they age to a sort of darker yellow color. It's a terrific plant for a wet area. Viscosum is the Latin for what is called swamp azalea, and so this plant actually likes to have its feet wet. So if you have a damp area on your property and you need a shrub for it, and you need a shrub that flowers in the summer, this is a great choice. There are different varieties of Azalea viscosums that come in different colors, some in pink and some in white. So there are a few different colors to choose from. So this is a good choice if you're looking for a summer blooming shrub for your wet area. Okay, now it's time to get in the water. Okay, so now it's time to plant a lotus. Now, there are 2 main kinds of aquatic flowering plants that people grow in this area. One is the water lily and the other is the lotus. Now, water lilies need to be planted, need to have quite a depth of water over them, anywhere from a foot to even 2.5 feet. The lotus, on the other hand, likes to be very close to the surface. It's actually in its native condition, it grows in sort of shallow, muddy water. It's a plant that basically grows in the muck. So I'm going to plant it in this big plastic pot My pond is about 2 feet deep. This pot is about 18 inches deep. So that means that the top of the lotus plant where it's in the pot will be about 6 inches beneath the water level, which is about right. Also, unlike water lilies, lotus leaves don't really float on the surface of the water, they rise up above it. Now this lotus, which is in a little bucket of water, is already in a pot. But this pot is really much too small. So I'm going to transplant it into this much bigger pot. Now I went to my compost pile and I filled this bucket with compost. Because lotuses and water lilies grow in the mud, they like a very rich soil. But you shouldn't use regular potting soil because regular potting soil has a lot of peat moss in it and things like perlite, which will float and will make the top of your water dirty looking. So you want to use either bags of compost from, the hardware store or garden soil. You don't want to use potting soil, and you don't want to use any soil that has fertilizer in it. Time-release fertilizer, because that will cause algae to grow in your pond. So I'm just going to pick this up and add a little bit more into here like that. Okay. A little bit more. I think I need a little more. Get it right depth. Okay. Now I want to be careful not to damage this when I take it out. So I'm going to put my hand inside the pot like this over the top, and I'm going to flip it over. All the gravel's going to fall out. And you can see, if you look closely, that it's already sending up. These are all new runners that will produce new leaves and new flowers. So already this plant is very pot bound. And I'm going to make sure that I take that piece of plastic off, try to loosen this up a bit. And then I'm going to set it in the center of this pot. Actually, I still want it to be a little bit higher. I'm going to put in a little more soil, like that. And then I'm going to set this in the middle of the pot, spread it out as much as I can, and then I'm going to fill in around it. And pack it down, not too hard. Take this over here, just dump this in there. There we go. Now, if you have a pond with a filtering system and you like your water to be very clear, then you might also want to put a layer of builder sand, not beach sand, but builder sand over the top of this soil, because when I put this in the water, some of that soil is gonna wash out a little bit. I actually I'm not particularly concerned with that in this pond. I don't really strive for my water being crystal clear, so for me it's not a big concern. Now I'm going to pick this up, and it's rather heavy, and carry it into the pond. I've made a little walkway through here. And I'm going to set this down. I'm going to try not to break the flower, but there's more buds coming, so if I do, that's not a big deal. And I'm stuck in the mud a little bit. And then I'm just going to step in here like that. I'm going to pull this towards me, lift it up. Now luckily, once I get it into the water, I can just float it along. And I have to be careful not to disturb my other water lilies. I'm going to put it over in here where I think it will look really nice. And now I'm going to slowly press it down, let the water fill into it. That's going to start making it heavy. And the slower I do this, the less of the dirt will come out. And then it just sinks right there. And the bubbles are from the air coming out. And it's at a good depth. Right there. We saved our flower. And there's another bud right here. And that's a very good depth for it. And if you look over here, you'll see here's another lotus. Now this is a dwarf lotus. This, on the other hand, is a large lotus. So you can see how much bigger the leaf is. And here's one over here as well. And you can see how they grow. Here's the flower. This is a long runner coming off of this plant. Here's a flower bud coming up. And what I'm going to do is, because the water where it's trying to grow is a little bit too deep for it, I'm going to bring it over into here and put it into an area that's a little bit more shallow, so it has a chance of rooting in. Now while I'm in here, I might as well do a little bit of weeding, because I can't reach the plants. I can't reach the edge without being in the water, and I have all kinds of tenacious little weeds that come up, and this is a good opportunity while I'm in here to pull them out. This is the one garden that I have that I'm not so concerned with weeds. I let it be relatively natural, but even so, I try to keep them from getting too out of control. So things like this, I just want to pull out. If I go over into here, I'm walking slowly because all of these water lilies are in pots, and I don't want to knock them over or disturb them too much. But I'm going to try to get over into here. Okay, so it's hard for me to weed from the outside here, so while I'm in the water, I usually just come through and try to pull out some of the things that are maybe getting to be a bit of a problem, which actually isn't much. And usually what I do is I just take them, and after I weed them, I don't want to put them in the water because they'll rot, but I just sort of stick them underneath something and use them as mulch. And while I'm in here talking about mulch, did you know that grass clippings make an excellent mulch? I mulch a lot of my gardens with grass clippings. It's a great way to use them, and they smother weeds like crazy. They may not be quite as pretty as bark mulch, but they break down really quickly, enrich the soil, and smother weeds. So if you're wondering what to do with your grass clippings after you mow your lawn, think about using them as mulch. Before we go, I want to show you this beautiful plant. This is Lobelia red heart. Now when I say lobelia, a lot of people think of the blue little ground cover plant that people often use in window boxes and baskets. But this is actually a hybrid of a native plant called Lobelia cardinalis, which is a wetlands plant. The native plant has red flowers, but they've started to hybridize them, and these have beautiful pink flowers. And you can see they're just starting. Soon this whole area will be tall spikes of these pink flowers. They'll probably end up getting almost 3 feet tall. When they're happy, they spread quite a bit and you can divide them. Last year I bought 3 original plants, and this spring I divided them and got 15 plants, which I used to fill this whole area. And they're going to be lovely for probably the next 6 weeks, even 2 months. So again, this is a wet area plant. If you have a damp area on your property that gets sun, this is a good choice. Okay, so let's go over a few things. Remember that when you're buying annuals in particular, sometimes perennials, but it's more often annuals that are potted up more than one plant in a pot. If, say for instance, you see a pot of zinnias that you really like, but it seems expensive because it's $9 or $12 or $15, take a look closely at it. See if there's more than one plant. There may be 3 or 4. And don't hesitate to buy that pot and divide those 4 plants separately. Then you get plants for more like $3 a plant as opposed to $12 for one. And remember when I mentioned earlier about using the grass as clippings as mulch? I put some down here yesterday. I put it down nice and thick. In this weather it dries out very quickly, but it smothers weeds like crazy. And by the end of the summer, the worms and other insects will have completely broken it down, and it's sort of like compost that's composting in place. One last thing. If you remember when we went to Sylvan Nursery and I pointed out little pots of butterfly bush, this is a full-grown butterfly bush. This one is called Pink Delight, and it has these long sprays of beautiful pink flowers. It will bloom all summer long because it starts to branch, and the subsequent flowers will be smaller, but they'll keep coming out. So you can see here, here's the big main one, and then these are smaller, and then this branch is going to produce a smaller one. Now every spring I cut this plant down by almost 3/4, and all this growth that you see here, which is probably almost 4 feet of growth, has happened just since the spring. It also has a really amazing fragrance. So I highly recommend butterfly bush for your sunny summer garden. Well, Puck's been relaxing in the shade the whole time I've been working, but we really did get a lot done today. I think he's going back to the shade now. We planted a lotus in my pond, and we planted some annuals in the blue and white garden. And remember that if you want to follow me on my blog, you can find me on the web at ayearinmygarden.blogspot.com. And if you have some tips that you'd like to share, you can contact me through my website, www.andrewgrossman.com. Thanks for joining me in the garden, and I'll see you next time.